Using the Enneagram as a tool in times of stress. Tonight I thought I'd want to share with you how I use it as a tool. Now, as I go through this, if you have questions, go ahead and write them as we go on. So I'm going to tell you how I use it as a tool. So when I started to think about that, I started to think, I really didn't start using the Enneagram until I discovered what the point of having an Enneagram type was. What's the point of knowing your Enneagram number or type? So I wanted to start off by asking you guys, what do you think the point is of knowing your Enneagram type number? I mean, you've lived years without it, so why bother with it? So what could be the possible reasons that people want to know their Enneagram? Maybe you think it's a fad or, it's just a flavor of the month sort of thing. But I want to tell you, I never started using the Enneagram as a tool until I discovered the point of knowing what Enneagram type I most relate to. So what are some of those reasons? Would you like to share some of them with me? Why do you think? Why are you interested in knowing your Enneagram number? What would be the reason for you? I think some people, they want to be just more self-aware. I think some people think, well, this is a great tool because I'll become more self-aware. That's a good reason. I think other people, and I think we've known this for years, I remember my mother in Australia used to get a women's magazine, and it seemed every week there were these little tests they did to find out all sorts of things, all these, I'm not going to go into what tests they were, but people seem to like to do tests that sort of tell them something about themselves. It's almost like, oh, I wonder what it's going to say, as if we don't know ourselves already. But I do think some people get involved with the Enneagram because they want to discover more about themselves and what they're like. I'm getting some really good answers right now. Yeah, to help me grow. I want to pick up on that in a minute. Another reason why people might be doing it, and if it was like me, I had people into it in my household before I was into it. And so they were telling me, why don't you take this? Or they kept calling me a number all the time. And it sort of bothered me that I got called a number, especially when I thought I was a 10 to Barbara and she told me I was an 8 or a 7. That was very disappointing. But don't laugh, Barbara. That's what I went through when I first heard about the Enneagram numbers. But a lot of you are saying right now, the reason why you took the Enneagram, why you're interested in it, is for personal growth. I really like it. But let me tell you when things started to change. I realized my Enneagram number and the characteristics of the type I most relate to is actually, for me, a tool of measurement. And what it measures for me, the Enneagram, is the quality of how I'm doing my life. And it's not a label. It's not just, oh, I'm a 7, I'm an enthusiast in the Enneagram. I mean, that's a very important thing to know. But the more important thing to know is, how am I doing as a 7 in the Enneagram? Another way of putting that is, how healthy a 7 am I? A lot of people have asked me, what's the best Enneagram number to have? Now, I do a lot of Enneagram training in a manufacturing setting, and so in a company, and they'll say, in this company, what's the best number to have? Who gets on the best here? And I have an answer for that, and you might have heard it before, but the answer is this. Any number is okay. It's not the number that's important. It's how healthy you are as that number. And so for all of you who said, I want to use the Enneagram to learn how to grow, I think what you're saying is, and I relate to this, I want to grow away from the unhealthy parts of what I'm like and grow towards the healthy parts of what I'm like. this tool, if you've done an assessment, if you've done any test online with the Enneagram, you usually get a printout, and most good Enneagram tests will actually describe not only the type that you measured highest in your answers on, but it will also show you like 3 levels of that type. What an unhealthy type looks like, what an average type looks like, and what a healthy type looks like. And so when you look at that section, what it's actually telling you is, yes, you might relate to a particular type on the Enneagram, but really what's very important is for you to realize what are the unhealthy things that type does, what are the average things they do, and what are the really healthy things they do. And I think this is really important in a time of stress, because guess what? In times of stress, things really can get unhealthy for us very quickly. And so if you know your Enneagram type, I'm going to ask you, do you understand what an unhealthy type of your same number looks like? What do they do? Have you become familiar with that? In times of coronavirus, tornadoes, or political upheaval, even the most calm and centered of us, during those times, and consistent people, normally we're consistent, but in those sort of times, a lot of us switch into what the Enneagram talks to survival mode. We start to operate in a certain way because there's something within us that wants to survive and keep going. And there are different ways that we try to protect ourselves when we feel threatened or at risk. And so the Enneagram for me became a tool for me to understand more about the way I try to protect myself when I'm under stress. Have you noticed the way that you try to protect yourself when you're under stress? Do you notice what you tend to go towards? So maybe that's difficult for you just to sit there and come up with an answer. This is precisely why I say use the Enneagram as a tool to help you know what you might be doing. So, for example, I'm going to read out a few things and you might go, bingo. You might go, this is me. For some of us, crisis may lead us to numb out. We appear calm and resilient from the outside, but really, that's just an act. Inside, you're not feeling that way, but you strive to appear calm and resilient. Others may feel it difficult to move on quickly, and they are tuned into the grief and the loss of their whole community or their whole world. And so for them in a crisis, they find it hard to move quickly onto other things. They're just dominated by that thought. Some of us in a crisis downplay the impact on themselves and just focus on others. They actually get busier. They don't really do a lot of self-care. They just activate and start doing things like that. Some people may actually look to rescue people. They're not only just keeping busy, but they start projects of rescue or projects that are really going to help other people. And the last group of people might, for example, feel like I was born for such a time as this. These are people that have anticipated one of these days I'm going to be called upon and this is my moment. And so they volunteer and they go straight towards people that are in crisis or people that need their help. So what are you like under times of stress? I know, for example, for me personally, I'm going to get personal here. Before I did the Enneagram, before I understood how I was wired, I've been married for a lot of years, 34 years. And yep, Barbara's looking at me. She's counting it up. 33 or 34 years. 34 it is, dear. I'm right.
You're right.
And so throughout my marriage, Barbara used to often say to me a thing like this: why do you get so angry all the time, right? And many of you have heard me talk about this, but it was true. I had a pretty short fuse for some things. Now, what was interesting about the type of anger I had, I used to get angry at little things like kids leaving the lights on, or tools being taken and not put back in their box, or all that sort of stuff. Barbara's given me a few faces. She's adding the list. We could go on, but it's not about that right now. But she used to ask me what I was angry about, and I really didn't have an answer for that. Why did I get so angry? But the funny thing about me, if something calamitous happened, if we were in an accident, a major thing happened, I sort of calm down and can just get on with it. So little things bug me a lot, and big things I can handle, okay? And Barbara actually is quite the opposite. We've observed that about ourselves. So when I took the Enneagram test, in the part of the test is it not only gives you a number, but that number, so I'm a 7, that number is partnered with 2 other numbers in a triad, and that triad of numbers share an emotional core, like what truly is it the deep emotion of themselves. And what it is, they know that they're trying to control within themselves, and they've always had it. So for example, if you are an 8, a 9, or a 1, a challenger, a peacemaker, or a reformer, the core emotion is anger. And that's like, those people know that if that monster gets out of the cage, whoa, it's not going to be pretty. So they try and, they try and control it and suppress it all their life, and they usually do a pretty good job of it, not always, but they usually do. If you're a 2, a 3, or a 4, oh, Adam, my son just texted, go to mum if you spilled something and go to dad if you crash your car. Unfortunately, that's the truth. So back to, if you're a 2, a 3, or a 4, which is a helper, an achiever, and an individualist, the core emotion isn't anger. The thing that those people have been battling all their life is embarrassment or shame, and they've been trying to avoid that all of their life. That's their core emotion. These are the sort of people that sit in class and go, don't pick me, don't pick me, or volunteered for behind the scenes rather than on the stage performing or anything like that. Except for the achievers, if you give them a lot of notice, they love to really perform, but they need a lot of notice. They don't like to be thrown into it. So their core emotion for that triad, as I said, is embarrassment or shame. And in the triads of 5, 6s, and 7s, which are investigators and loyalists and enthusiasts, their core emotion is actually anxiety or worry. And these are the people that, ever since they were kids, they're always anticipating the future, worried about what it might be that they need to wear or to do, and they have to come up with several contingency plans to sort of cover all their bases. These are the people that lay up at night and cannot get to sleep because they're thinking about what's going to happen in the future. So anyway, Barbara used to say to me, why do you get angry all the time? So when I did the Enneagram and identified, it took a while, but identified for me that I am really a type 7, which is an enthusiast. I noticed that the core emotion, at least the Enneagram told me, the core emotion was anxiety. It was not anger. Now, I've got a lot of 8 in me, and that core emotion for that group is anger. But I did a little experiment with Barbara, and I said to her, when you see me angry next time, and I hate to admit it, she didn't have to wait long, she asked me, what are you worried about, instead of what are you angry about? Now, to what are you angry about, I don't know, I'm just angry. To what you were worried about, I will tell you something, it sort of opened me up because there was a reason I was worried. I could articulate that reason. And as I've grown with using the Enneagram as a tool, knowing that anxiety is the core thing I need to manage in my life is really important. Anxiety is the core thing I need to manage, not anger management. If I don't manage my anxiety, it will manifest as anger. So learning more about the Enneagram, I realized that under stress, my number 7 heads towards a 1, and the core emotion of a 1 is anger. And so when I am stressed, and if I don't manage that anxiety, there's a pretty good chance it will manifest as anger. So what's really bizarre about that using that tool and that little story I had, is I was manifesting something. I could have said, well, this Enneagram's not right because, you know, I'm a lot more angry than I am worried. But actually, the core emotion was anxiety. I hope my children, who have already commented, my wife that's sitting here, as I've grown in using these self-awareness techniques, as I've grown in using that, I've started practices that deal with managing my anxiety. I've taken responsibility for that. So often I was angry at what other people did or what I did, but you know, I realized that if I start the morning, for example, in quiet, if I sort of connect with the quiet early in the morning, it could be reading, it could be sitting, listening to music, but if I just purposely sort of calm myself down. Now, because I'm a 7, I do have a lot of things that I'm thinking about what I'm going to do throughout the day. I have that through the night. But if I can get a gap in the morning where I can be still, and for me, I do pray during that time, I do meditate, I do just try and quiet myself down. A cup of tea helps, and I just sit there. My day goes quite differently than if I just get up and start rushing on into it like I used to do. Because actually sitting quietly and reading for a 7 is like boring. At least I thought it was. But because I do not want to inflict my uncontrolled anxiety on other people, I discipline myself to connect with the quiet in the morning. So if you think about that story and what I just said, I was manifesting anger, but my core emotion was anxiety. So that could be true for any one of you. Right now in a time of crisis, you might be manifesting a dominant sort of feeling, but it may not be what you need to focus on fixing in order to stop that feeling from having its way. So for me, I didn't go into anger management. I went into anxiety management thanks to the Enneagram, and that's made a world of difference to me. So let's think about what that might be. So for example, if you're a 9, under crisis, you might head towards a 6, which is a loyalist. So a peacemaker could head that way. Normally, 9s anger's their core emotion. Most of them deny it and can get quite angry denying it, okay? But one thing I do know about a 9 that makes them angry, I've lived with one for 34 years, is that they can get really angry if someone's causing trouble for other people. Oh, yes, they can. So they don't really get angry for themselves like I do, but they get angry if other people are causing trouble for other people. But when they're under stress, they become highly like an unhealthy 6, and they start to worry all the time. So they start to manifest anxiety. And so even though you might be saying, I'm so stressed out right now, I must be in the triad of the 5, 6s and 7s with that core emotion of anxiety. And actually, you might be in another triad, but that's what it's coming out as, is worry. So I invite you to sort of think about that a little bit. So are there any questions or comments about what I just said so far? Because that's pretty, I hope you were tracking with me there. Are there any comments or questions that you might have? A comment, one person listening said that was an aha moment for them as well. You know, It can help you understand yourself and your family. I like that too. So that little journey from me, going from thinking I had anger issues and I needed to deal with that, going from that to realizing, no, I've got to live managing my anxiety, that helped me understand other people in my own family as well. Any other comments that you guys might have or questions about that particular part of it? Okay. So the point of the Enneagram and using it as a tool is this, that it's a tool to help you become aware of what might be invisible to you that everybody else is experiencing. Underlying anger, underlying shame, or underlying anxiety. Those are the three big things that I wanted to speak about tonight to you, just to really give you a good understanding. Think about it. What is the core emotion? Is it underlying anger? Have you always had an anger problem and you've known it as with your siblings? Is it underlying shame? Have you always felt, embarrassed strongly or could be embarrassed strongly? Or is it underlying anxiety? How are you doing at the moment? How would people describe you that are living with you at the moment? What are they seeing, or what are you realizing? What is this pointing to in your life? So, somebody just asked me right now, as an 8, when 8 are usually under stress, their challenges, normally they don't have a problem just sort of being spontaneous and letting people know what they think and expressing their anger or a sense of injustice. They are very good at standing up for a victim. But often when 8s get under stress, they turn into people that are a bit more like lawyers. They actually, instead of sort of shooting from the hip, they go develop a case. And they get a lot of evidence. They do a lot of research. So they become more like an investigator. And so their normal mode of operation is they're pretty confident in themselves. But man, if they get under stress, they become like a Philadelphia lawyer. They get all the case studies. They just are going to bombard that person with the evidence they cannot deny. Someone else has asked me, are there other ways that a 9 might resemble a 6? Yeah, I do. I think peacemakers can resemble loyalists. They can take on, in my opinion, they can become highly suspicious. Sort of security is sort of rocked, and so they start to question friendships and loyal people and start to sort out who are the safe people, who aren't the safe people, something like that. One is just telling me, and it's true, that when reformers are under stress, normally they're pretty confident and they have a process for most things, they're in order, their life's pretty controlled. But if they really get stressed out, they can pretty quickly go inward in themselves, get pretty sad and isolate and sort of block other people out. And that can happen. I just would say to that person, and I spoke to one tonight, in these days of stress, you'd be amazed. A lot of ones are out there trying to rescue everybody. And you'd be amazed if you could take a 15-minute breather, step away from the front line and just calm yourself down and experience, if you like, someone holding you, whether it's literally someone or if you believe in God holding you. You'd be amazed what 15 minutes of that will do to calm down that sense of being heavily weighed down with a cloud, Yeah, a lot of anxiety does come from trying to control others, that's for sure. And no one is that controllable. I always think control is an illusion. We're never really in control of ourselves or anybody else, to be honest. We need to be controlled. I think we're designed that way. And I think we've been given a spirit of self-control, but it doesn't generate from within us. It comes from outside. So I think a lot of our anxiety is the ability to actually unfurl your fists and say, you know what, I'd love to control it. I'd like to hang on to it, but I've got to get rid of it. This is one of the practices that I've had to do. So, yeah, that's exactly right. When you're under stress, you've got your own emotions that are normal, but you start to manifest other emotions that are in that, in those triads that I just mentioned. So, yeah, and yeah, that's true. Adam, my son, is a 7 like me. In times of stress, the fun-loving guy seems to leave and you become very perfectionistic at that sort of time. So I'm just about ready to close here, but please consider what I've said tonight. Think about what is your underlying emotion. Come to know that. Look at the Enneagram book, research it, whatever. Become familiar with that and look at the emotion that you move towards under stress. And then try and begin to think about, what do I need to be doing that the way that I'm wired is not unregulated. If you truly love those that you work with, like for me, managing my anxiety is a very important thing for those that I lead or those that I live with. If I am not managing my anxiety and it's going to manifest as anger, well, that's not going to be good. So it's my job to manage that. And meditation and prayer, for me, seeking the quiet. I know for Barbara as a 9, one of the things she's discovered, which is really true, is connecting in nature or journaling is really important for her to manage her stress and the way she does it. But as we go on, I'm going to keep talking about these things. I did mention, I was going to say, what I told you about the realization that I have an anxiety, not an anger problem, has had a profound impact on my marriage. Plus, it's helped Barbara understand me, but me understand Barbara as well. And so there are many benefits to this. So I'm going to close right now. It's 8:30, but I just thank you so much for joining in. Please leave comments. I will keep looking at this feed. Invite friends into this, and I invite you also to come again at 8 p.m. next Thursday night. I'll have another talk like this. So thank you so much for being here. It's great to see your names, and thank you for the interaction as well. So I will say goodbye. God bless you.